Hi, we're going to continue our discussion of moral development. In our last video, we talked about right and wrong, and then we discussed how does morality develop. We did an overview of 3 different perspectives and specifically said more about cognitive development. In this video, we are going to look at social learning and evolution. Evolution is the nature side of nature-nurture, and social learning is the nurture side of nature-nurture. So social learning is the idea that we learn right and wrong through conditioning and observational learning. So conditioning means direct reinforcements and punishments for behaviors. And then observational learning is about modeling and imitation. So watching somebody do something or model a behavior and then imitating or reproducing what we see. The person who is especially well known in this area is Bandura. He was the first person to demonstrate observational learning in the laboratory and show that we can learn through more than just direct experience of reinforcements and punishments. We can learn just by watching. And what he did in his original work, and he has been working for decades, and this work has been replicated just many, many times for many years. It's a very well-established form of learning. But what he did in that original work is he tested 4-year-olds. Some of the 4-year-olds spent a little bit of time with an adult and a Bobo doll, and the adult modeled aggression toward the Bobo doll in very specific ways that were highly controlled and measurable. And then the other group of kids spent the same amount of time with the adult and the Bobo doll, but there was no aggressive modeling. Then, these kids were tested one at a time. Each child would be allowed to spend some time in a room with a whole bunch of toys and no specific instructions. They were just told to play. And the question was, would kids who watched the aggressive modeling play differently than the kids who had not seen the aggressive modeling? Okay, so Bandura did this study in various ways. There were studies where the adult was in person, studies where the adult was on video, and so forth. Okay, I'm going to show you a little clip, and in this clip, you're going to see kind of the tail end of one child and the beginning of another child. I'm not going to show you the whole clip. It's about 5 minutes in total. If you wanted to watch it, it's linked in the resources folder, but I'll show you a little piece of it. Okay, so here's one of the children. We're sort of at the tail end of what he's been doing. He not only imitated exactly what he saw the adult do, so for example, hitting it with the mallet was something that was directly modeled. Kicking it, throwing it, these were all directly modeled. But what Bandura discovered is that kids not only imitated what they saw, but they also would get creative and they would expand. In other words, watching the aggression led them to actually show more aggression in the laboratory, but then aggression fed aggression. So the more aggression they showed, the more they showed. So here's a second child, and she's taking a little break here. Those are some dishes over on the other side. But like the other kids who had seen the aggressive modeling, she spends a lot of time doing the aggressive behaviors. Again, she's hitting with the mallet. That was directly modeled. But now she's starting to get creative. She's starting to throw balls at the Bobo doll. And there's a tether ball. And children in the aggressive modeling condition were more drawn to guns. So there was no gun modeling, but there was a toy gun in the room, and kids were more drawn to the guns. And here she's using a baby doll as a weapon, and then she goes on from there. Okay, so Bandura first demonstrated that children will imitate aggression that they have seen modeled. And as I said before, this has been replicated many times in all kinds of contexts. Now, another perspective is the biological or evolutionary approach, and I'm going to show you part of this video as well. If you want to see the whole thing, it is linked in the resources folder, and the total video is about 13 minutes. I'll show you a portion of that. But as you're watching, I want you to be noticing the methods that are being used and make a connection back to Unit 2 when we were talking about looking time methods and other ways of studying babies and getting into their heads. And then be thinking, what are the author's conclusions about this data, and do you think they're justified? And what might be some alternative explanations for what we're seeing in the babies?
It's a question people have asked for as long as there have been people. Are human beings inherently good? Are we born with a sense of morality? Or do we arrive blank slates waiting for the world to teach us right from wrong? Or could it be worse? Do we start out nasty, selfish devils who need our parents, teachers, and religions to whip us into shape? The only way to know for sure, of course, is to ask a baby. But until recently, it's been hard to persuade them to open up and share their secrets. Enter the Baby Lab.
The story will continue in a moment.
This is the creature at the center of the greatest philosophical, moral, and religious debates about the nature of man, the human baby. They don't do much, can't talk, can't write, can't expound at length about their moral philosophies. But does that mean they don't have one? The philosopher Rousseau considered babies perfect idiots knowing nothing. And Yale psychologist Karen Wynn, director of the Infant Cognition Center here, the Baby Lab, says for most of its history, her field agreed.
Didn't we just think that these creatures at 3 months and even 6 months were basically just little blobs?
Oh, sure. I mean, if you look at them, they kind of look like little, cute little blobs, but they can't do all the things that an older child can. They can't even do the things that a dog or a pigeon or a rat can.
No pulling levers for treats or running mazes for these study subjects, but they can watch puppet shows.
Up goes the curtain.
And Wynn is part of a new wave of researchers who have discovered seemingly simple ways to probe what's really going on in those adorable little heads.
Up goes the curtain.
We watched as Wynn and her team asked a question that 20 years ago might have gotten her laughed out of her field. Does Wesley here, at the ripe old age of 5 months, know the difference between right and wrong? Wesley watches as the puppet in the center struggles to open up a box with a toy inside. The puppy in the yellow shirt comes over and lends a hand. Then the scene repeats itself, but this time the puppy in the blue shirt comes and slams the box shut. Nice behavior? Mean behavior. At least to our eyes. But is that how a 5-month-old sees it? And does he have a preference?
Leslie, do you remember these guys from the show?
To find out, a researcher who doesn't know which puppet was nice and which was mean offers Wesley a choice.
Who do you like?
He can't answer, but he can reach.
That one.
Wesley chose the good guy, and he wasn't alone.
That one.
More than 3/4 of the babies tested reached for the nice puppet.
That one.
Wynn tried it out on even younger babies, 3-month-olds, who can't control their arms enough to reach. But they can vote with their eyes, since research has shown that even very young babies look longer at things they like.
Which one do you like?
Daisy here looked at the mean puppet for 5 seconds, then switched to the nice one for 33.
Babies, even at 3 months, looked towards the nice character and looked hardly at all, much shorter times, towards the unhelpful character.
So basically, as young as 3 months old, we human beings show a preference for nice people over mean people.
Study after study after study, the results are always consistently babies feeling positively towards helpful individuals in the world and disapproving, disliking, maybe condemning individuals who are antisocial towards others.
It's astonishing.
Wynne and her team first published their findings about baby morality in the journal Nature in 2007, and they've continued to publish follow-up studies in other peer-reviewed journals ever since. For instance, on this experiment, they showed babies like James here a puppet behaving badly. Instead of rolling the ball back to the puppet in the middle, this green-shirted bunny keeps the other puppet's ball and runs away. Then James is shown a second show. This time, the bunny, who we just saw steal the ball, tries to open up the box to get the toy. Will James still prefer the puppet who helps out, or will he now prefer the one who slams the box shut?
Who do you like?
He chose the one who slammed it shut, as did 81% of babies tested. The study's conclusion, babies seem to view the ball thief as deserving punishment.
So do you think that babies, therefore, are born with an innate sense of justice?
At a very elemental level, I think so.
We think we see here the foundations for morality. Some way to do the punishment.
Paul Bloom is also a professor of psychology at Yale with his own lab. He's collaborated with Wynne on many of her baby studies, and he also happens to be her husband.
I feel we're making discoveries. I feel like we're discovering that what seems to be one way really isn't. What seems to be an ignorant and unknowing baby is actually a creature with this alarming sophistication, subtle knowledge.
And he says discovering this in babies who can't walk, talk, or even crawl yet suggests it has to come built in.
So remember B.F. Skinner, who said that we had to teach our children everything through conditioning. So does this just wipe him off the map?
What we're finding in the baby lab is that there's more to it than that there's a universal moral core that all humans share. The seeds of our understanding of justice, our understanding of right and wrong, are part of our biological nature.
Which one?
So you saw some babies doing some really interesting things, and these were not subtle. This was like 81%, 87% of babies doing particular behaviors. So the question is, how do we explain that? So it's not, these are things that have been replicated study after study, and they're high percentages. So something's happening, but what is it? And the authors conclude that they're revealing a universal moral core, that we have come into the world pre-wired through evolution to have this universal moral core, which is small and fragile, but it gets built over time into something much bigger and much more like the way we see right and wrong as we get older. But, what might be some alternative explanations for this data? So maybe babies prefer to reach toward the right rather than the left. So how do you test that? Well, you flip-flop which stuffed animal goes on the right versus the left. So it's not that. Maybe babies prefer a certain color on average. So maybe they're always reaching toward the animal with a certain color shirt. So what do? You flip it. So sometimes the good one is wearing one color and sometimes the good one's wearing the other color. It's not the color. And so what researchers have been doing is chipping away at all of these alternative explanations, and they have not yet found an explanation that works other than the evolutionary one. Maybe they're right. Maybe they're not right. But they have revealed something interesting in the pattern of babies' behavior. Okay, so thank you.